Hey, what is up guys, FlotownHockey here, and today I want to go over some information that I learned from my friend Forrest Dowling. He's the lead level designer for Bioshock Infinite, and he worked on the game Homefront. So as of right now, he's working at Irrational Games, and in this video I just want to go over what it's like to be in the gaming industry, and what it's like to be in the position of a lead level designer for a game. So it's a lot different than most people would expect, so I just want to discuss all the information for it within this video, so you'll have a better concept of it. But before we begin the video, I want to show you guys the opening scene of Bioshock Infinite. And in this opening scene, I want you all to pay attention to the structures, the details within them, and the overall environment seen throughout this game, because that's why it's so great and so different from any other game of this generation. It's that diversity in aesthetics and other features that makes it stick out and appealing to most audiences. So pay attention to those kind of aspects, and I'll talk to you guys shortly. So now that you've seen the opening scene for Bioshock Infinite, let's go over the creation process for that game from start to finish and what it was like for the developers throughout this process. So to start out, they first thought of what was important to do within this game. And I know that's a broad topic for any game developer to actually think about, but when it comes down to it, you actually have to think about that. What is important to do within a game? So there are two topics here. There is storytelling and motivation. In storytelling, you want to keep it natural and make it seem as if the player is doing nothing wrong. To do this, developers actually stuck to the guideline that said it only happened if the player experienced it. Now I'm going to repeat that. It only happened if the player experienced it. So this rule basically states that you can't have any background information already preloaded onto a character when a player starts a brand new game. So an example is seen with Booker DeWitt at the very beginning of Bioshock Infinite. Whenever you start out the game, he's on a lifeboat and he's going to a mysterious island, and the only thing that helps him remember who he is as a person and what he's done in the past, or who he's been in the past, is inside this one briefcase he has, and inside he has pictures, a gun, documents, everything, so forth like that. And that's how the player starts the game. It's a whole new experience, and it makes a more personal adventure for each player. With that said, each player must learn firsthand through the character of Booker DeWitt on what's going on throughout the game. So as they play throughout their journey, they're actually learning more and more about his past, and through that perspective, players figure out who he is, who he was in the past, what he's supposed to do right now, and that ultimately creates the whole storyline behind their adventure. With that said, let's talk about motivation. Motivation is the want of a player to do something within a game. This idea is primarily seen through the use of rewards or the win game condition. Rewards are items that players can actually obtain by completing certain tasks within the game. So for example, if I'm fighting a boss enemy in Bioshock Infinite and I defeat him, I would expect a reward such as health, weapons, or salts that would actually reward me for my actions. So it's actually a way of satisfying a player for doing a certain task within the game. Another action that can be applied is seen through the win game condition, and this is seen through every game no matter what game you play. Every single game that you play will have a win game condition. In reference to Bioshock Infinite, completing the main storyline will be a win game condition for your player. The next step in the creative process is to entertain from the pitch onward. So whenever you're presenting your idea to a company or to anybody who's working within that company, you have to kind of inspire them that your idea is great. So that way they'll be more creative when they're actually working with you to help develop this idea. So for example, if I'm a concept artist and you're actually pitching your idea to me, let's just say you're talking about dragons, creating a game about dragons, and I'm like, oh cool, that's actually a really good idea, I want to draw some dragons. Then that would actually inspire me to be very creative during my process when I'm creating concept art throughout the game. So overall, it helps the company become more unified and actually work together more efficiently. Whenever you're working on a game, you have to learn how to minimize exposition. By this phrase, I mean that you have to learn how to make complicated events that are also entertaining at the same time. So as players are going from A to B within a game, they can actually face these events that are entertaining, but they're also complex. So an example is seen in Bioshock Infinite. Whenever you start out as Booker DeWitt on that boat, you have to travel from there on point A all the way to point B to find Elizabeth. So going from that point A all the way to point B, you will find all these challenges awaiting you, and that is considered minimizing exposition. In the third step for the creation process for Bioshock Infinite, developers wanted to do the unexpected and surprise the players. Now this is right up the alley of the lead level designer Forrest Dowling, and he said that he wanted to do this as well, but he said not to repeat yourself and always demonstrate cause and effect reactions. So he gave two examples. The very first one is a floor collapsing because it was set on fire. So as a player is walking, out of nowhere the floor would collapse and they would fall through it. That would surprise the player, therefore fitting the criteria. Then he gave a second example that said if there's rubble on the ground anywhere across the map, then there should be a hole in a nearby wall or ceiling. And if you think about it, that only makes sense because if there's a hole in the wall, then there's rubble on the ground because the wall kind of like caved in or whatever. And it's actually a really important part of level design because he said that they've declined people to their company and they've actually removed people from their company for not creating enough cause and effect reactions such as that. So it's really important. Don't forget that aspect and just keep that in mind if you're considering going into this kind of field. Now that we're starting to talk about suggestions from Forrest Dowling, let's talk about his position as a lead level designer in Bioshock Infinite. So for starters, he suggested to keep the fantastical grounded. Now such things as sidewalks, stairwells, and connecting buildings, all that needs to stay somewhat realistic within the game. So players don't want to venture off and be floating on a cloud or anything like that. They want to see that there's some sort of realism in the game. So keep all that stuff grounded and don't put sidewalks on ceilings and crazy stuff like that because that just breaks the narrative from the game and it just looks really dumb. So don't do that. Furthermore, Forrest said that we should always be building towards a moment within the game. This is done by creating tension and anticipation for the players throughout gameplay. An example of this could be seen early on in Bioshock Infinite whenever you have to battle the fireman for the first time ever, and this is slowly introduced to the character over time. You don't go up to him right away and just start the fight. You actually see a shadowy figure go by on your screen, and you're like, oh, what's that? So it builds that kind of like unknowing sense. Then all of a sudden you see a piece of fiery debris come out of the sky, and it almost hits you. And then after that you're like, well, I almost got killed by something. Who's creating all this destruction? Then all of a sudden you hear screams from the townsfolk, and then you round the corner just to see him killing people. So after all that happens, he's been building up all this time, and you don't even know who the character is yet. So it builds that moment of anticipation, and it's like, wow, this is going to be epic. I can't wait to fight him. Either that or you're just going to be scared, and you're going to be like, well, I'm not doing this. One of those two. Something's going to happen. And that's what developers were going for. They were going for that sense of epicness. With that said, level designers should always watch out for T-junctions. This is a tab or something that gives visual information to the player throughout their gameplay. It is also suggested that the information given on this visual tab is put in the middle or lower portion of a player's screen. That way it doesn't distract from their gameplay. Even more, you need to focus on the scene and remove any unnecessary information from the screen. Aside from that, Forrest suggested that you should maximize movement choices within a map. So this is done by moving cover objects away from the wall and making them 360 degrees. This helps to create a better flow for the player, and it helps to make them develop more strategies throughout the game. It also helps to prevent camping, because as a player is playing the game, you don't want them to play against the NPCs and just be able to camp and kill them very easily. It takes away the challenge and the fun from the game. So try to prevent that and move objects away from the wall to create that sort of movement. At this point in development, level designers should watch out for level bugs and make a battle hardened edition for their map. So when a map is battle hardened, that means that a player can walk through it for the very first time and there will be no glitches or bugs occurring during that instance. So for example, if I'm in Bioshock Infinite and I go into a room and talk to an NPC and then I walk out of that room, I shouldn't be able to go back into that room and the NPC is glitching up or the level is actually blocked off in a certain way or anything like that. Everything should feel like you're absolutely free in the game, and that way you actually require exploration. Now let me make that very clear. As a level designer, you have to create spaces that require exploration. By doing this, players become immersed within the game and actually tend to be motivated to go and discover new locations in that realm. So as they're going and searching all these different areas, they find different rewards, unlock certain achievements, and complete certain tasks for the game. So while players are doing this, they become more involved in the game, and they actually feel like they have personal control over their character. During this part in the creation process, you have to remember two very important factors. The very first factor is to disguise trigger conditions, and the second one is to let the player opt in. Whenever you're trying to disguise trigger conditions, you want to give moments time to breathe. So an example in Bioshock Infinite, you're just in this club, you're walking up to this guy, you're trying to get some tickets or something like that, and then all of a sudden he stabs you in the hand. And that moment of anticipation building up to that moment was everybody just looking at you funny in that club, and it was just really kind of tense moment. So it built up to the moment, and then all of a sudden something just happened. And then it goes on into a gameplay scene where you just go and defeat all the enemies. So that kind of disguising that trigger condition, that's what you want to go for. Using that as an example, let's talk about letting players opt in. Whenever you let a player opt in within a game, you're giving them their own personal choice so that they can choose what path they want to go down throughout their world. So as they're playing throughout the game, they can actually choose their own destiny, so to speak. So whenever you give players these kind of choices, you want to make it so that they all lead up to the same end goal, but they're also different along the journey. So for example, whenever I got stabbed in the hand, I had a choice right beforehand. I could choose to trust the guy and leave my hand there, or I could choose to not trust him. And of course I chose to trust him, and when I trusted him, I got stabbed in the hand. So that was my own fault. I should have just killed him beforehand and then not got stabbed. But that's just a prime example of the cause and effect reaction that happens through letting a player opt in. Keep in mind that every strong point needs a weak point. So as you're making paths for a player to travel upon throughout the game, you want to make everything have an equal and opposite reaction depending on what they choose to do throughout their journey. Now, with that said, if it's easier for you, it's usually worse for the player. So if you build a level and you know everything about it, everything's very simple in your mind, you may just go throughout it with no problems at all. However, it may be different for your audience. They may find it to be very difficult and very hard to navigate through and on, and so you want to make it as balanced as possible in that aspect as well, because whenever you do that, players will be able to find things to be very easy and a lot more simplistic for them to play on. Through that statement, I want to say that you don't want to make levels too easy or too simple to navigate on. You want to have some sort of challenge or exploration implemented into the level so players will actually go and be motivated to explore more in the game and actually discover more items and rewards through that method. So don't forget that aspect, and always refer back to the previous statement, which was always create spaces that create exploration. So don't forget that, guys, it's really important. As for the overall creation process during Bioshock Infinite, you must remember that you have to overshoot your goals and push an idea to its greatest limit. Whenever you do this, you can always roll back to a previous idea in an earlier stage and develop it from there, but always stick with a great idea because you can always develop it further and further depending on how much creativity and inspiration you have towards it. Also, you have to listen to your players. If they say that there's something wrong in the game in certain areas of the map, you have to go back and change it no matter how much you may like it or how much your company may like it, because in the end, they're the ones who are going to be buying the game from you and your company, and you have to fulfill their satisfaction and their needs and their wants within that level. In order to improve your designs and overall concepts for your ideas, you have to maintain a rich media diet. So by this, I mean that you have to read books, magazines, articles, newspapers, you can watch movies, TV shows, and basically just have a wide variety of media to choose from and have a lot of knowledge on this type of media just so you can make a diverse set of games. So for example, say I've been reading a lot of books about dragons lately. Well, I can make a dragon themed level, and surely that's a cool thing, and I personally think that's pretty awesome, but you can only do so much with that idea. You actually have to go beyond that and combine different elements other than just one media choice. So let's just say I go and watch the Avengers after that, and I'm like, oh wow, what if I made heroes with the dragons? Or what if I made dragon heroes? And in that instance, you actually spark new ideas, and when you combine different references just like that, you can actually have more creativity in your design process. And that's what companies are looking for in the gaming industry today. They're looking for someone who has new ideas, new creativity, and such a great inspiration process that they can actually bring new stuff to the table, and that'll help further their company. Out of everything I've said, just keep in mind, you should never underestimate your audience, and you should never underestimate yourself. So by doing this, you can better your ideas, better your designs, and just become a better level designer and artist in the gaming industry overall. Well guys, that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the creation process as to what it was like in the position of Forrest Dowling as the lead level designer for Bioshock Infinite. And if you like this video, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.